Hey everybody, I'm Lex.
And I'm Lex.
Are you Lex?
I'm Jake.
I'm Jake. Well, that's at least the redundancy part of today's webcast. Hey, redundancy for small businesses. Redundancy.
Indeed.
It's redundant.
I'm just being informed that we've all been made redundant.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow, okay, wow. I guess we're going to take you guys through... Thanks for derailing me. We're going to take you guys through some of the easier ways that you can, make some high availability, avoid some critical pitfalls in
your infrastructure.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. So let's, should we jump in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So real quick, I just want to sort of talk about like the concepts of high availability and redundancy. The reason we wanted to talk about this today is traditionally these things are really associated with larger businesses.
Yeah, expensive, right? Larger businesses. And
so you get sort of a notion that to have redundant
from a small business.
Yeah, can't afford it, right? I need all this infrastructure. And for a lot of the really core parts of your infrastructure, the things we're going to talk about today, which are your domain controllers, DNS, DHCP, and DFS, it's cheap as free.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
Do you want to start with let's just talk about DCs, domain controllers.
Yeah. So domain controllers, they serve a lot of roles, FISMO roles.
Is that how you say it?
Is it FISMO or FISMO?
FISMO.
I say it FISMO.
FISMO?
I could be wrong.
That would be Josh over on Phone a Friend.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy.
How's it going?
We dragged him today.
I'm going with what Josh says because he's the expert, man.
And how did you go with it?
I go FISMO.
FISMO. All right.
So anyway, your domain controller provides authentication services for all your users, does group policy, and as we're going to see today, they can do a few different roles, and it's actually supported by Microsoft to co-locate these all on your domain controllers. The thing is, if you're a small business, you might have 1 or 2 servers, and that's all your infrastructure, and that's fine. But if you only have one domain controller,
bad things happen.
Aggressively bad.
That breaks. So
yeah.
It's not only a best practice, it's an insanity if you don't make a redundant DC.
Definitely.
So should we jump in and show a little bit?
So we're not really going to go through the DC setup process. It's a point and click.
Point and click. Follow the wizard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You have your Windows server. You add the AD services role, and you just click through. That's
AD services role. Manage.
Yep. So you go to add rules and features. Click through.
Skip past the stuff where you're supposed to read.
Yeah.
And then so this is basically.
You can see here. This has Active Directory domain services installed. When you install that.
You do that on a second server and
boom,
they play nice.
Yep.
As Brig would say, boop, boop. All right. So.
Nice and simple. But once that's in place, you can actually move on to DNS. As we all know, we talk about DNS quite a bit.
The floor is DNS, lava? Yeah, all right. That's again, another Brigism, man. I learn a lot from Brig, but again, if your DNS is not redundant, DNS, the server that's on goes down, no more internet, guys. You're going to get the calls, the whole internet's down, and
and then you're going to find out you don't have a domain controller anymore.
Whoops.
And your backups aren't working. So you get to not only rebuild your domain from scratch, because you can't just jam a new domain controller in.
That's a good point.
You get to rejoin every machine in your company to the domain. So that's fun.
So to do that, in this same area here under roles, we select, I'm just going to say since we're here, DHCP and DNS, and we'll kind of run you through doing a DNS and a DHCP redundancy. So you select these roles.
Yep.
So you follow the wizard at this point.
I hate to say how simple it is, but it is so easy.
It is that simple, and it's surprising how many people don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely
guys do this. So
so we go through here. We add these roles. Click next. It'll ask you to configure them. You've done this once already.
Yeah.
The idea here is we're just adding a second instance of these to your infrastructure, to your environment.
But so once I add that, it's added to the domain. I like the word auto-magically. It's gonna.
For some pieces of it, yeah.
Okay.
So the reason you want to do DNS on your domain controller is because when you do it on a domain controller, it's basically it's not authorized is the word to give.
It's a no-brainer, Josh.
So you typically want to keep your DNS on a domain controller because then it's Active Directory integrated DNS. Whereas if you're using like a bind server somewhere out there, then in your DC promo, you've got to specify that DNS delegation, and you just made your life a whole lot harder when you don't have to.
Yeah,
Keep it simple, guys.
The integration was what I was, the word I was looking for.
Okay.
So if we can actually pull this up here, just pop up in DNS.
Boop, boop, boop.
And you can see, so this is VDCS web. This is one of the 2 domain controllers for this network, and is also one of the 2 DNS servers for this network.
So I don't know if you guys have noticed, we do have a remote desktop open, so we're going to be jumping back and forth, so we will designate which ones we're working with there.
But because this is integrated into Active Directory, it has, you can actually see here that it is integrated into these zones, and
So it's going to basically take care of itself between the 2 machines.
yeah, more or less.
Is there anything on that specific thing? You said there's a few instances where we have to do a few things.
Yeah.
Anything with DNS on that?
Yeah, so although it's integrated into Active Directory and nice and simple, your machines, the machines on your network that are using DHCP to get leases, you set your DNS servers as part of the scope options, but it will not automatically add those to the DNS option, which is...
Where do we add those?
Yeah, so if we go into DHCP,
Okay.
we can again see VDCS web, right? Going to IPv4. Let me see here. Oh, this is the wrong one. Sorry, we need to be in DCP. There we go. All right. So we have our scope configured, right? This is the subnet that this network is.
Okay.
Right? These are the addresses being handed out. In the scope options here, and this will be pretty similar. You'll have these options set on pretty much any network. But you have your router, you have your DNS servers, and then you have your DNS domain name. Option 6 is DNS servers.
Okay.
And if you open it up in the scope options, you can see right here that we have .99.30.
That's the default for this specific one. So we want to add the secondary. Is that what we add here? Okay.
Yeah. And these are, when the computer has its lease and it gets these DNS servers, it looks at whichever one is listed first here.
Okay.
So the order is important. This is particularly big if you have like offsite, like an offsite location, like out of you have your main office here, you have a branch out there.
Okay.
You'd want to have the first DNS server on the branch be the server that is
Hit that one
physically
first.
there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So like we would add 172.16.99. Say 31 if that was the case. Hit add. I don't actually think this is a valid DNS server.
But it added it anyways.
But yeah, so
So you see, I mean, it's basically you're adding the IP there. Now, again, you were saying at Site 2, you'd want to have Site 2's IP address first and then Site 1's IP address second, so it hits it in that order.
so if Site 2 had the .31 server, you just hit up and boom.
Boom, there you go. Okay. So order's important there, guys.
Yep. But that's pretty much it for domain controllers and for DNS.
For DNS, do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Dear Lex and Jake, is there a way to disable DNS cache on the server I have PDQ on? Running ipconfig/flushdns gets old. Thanks, Jason A.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Jason.
I'm gonna pop in on this one.
I was going to say, I'm looking at you, man.
Yeah. So, Jason, if you're having to run flush DNS that often, that's usually indicative of a bigger DNS problem. You may want to look into like a DHCP update proxy, or maybe increase your scavenging intervals. But to answer your question directly, yes, it is possible, but that's kind of like taking a Band-Aid to a bigger problem.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like amputating the leg for a small cut.
Exactly.
PDQ deployed inventory use the Windows cached DNS entries. So
It's important.
it's not so much a PDQ issue as it is your infrastructure.
Very true. And I know Brig has got great KBs, and then I know we did a webcast on scavenging and setting up your DNS, so I would definitely check that out. Just
And all
search-
that's in the bonus content today.
Is it?
Yep, we have all our DNS webcasts in there. And then one thing to mention with DHCP as well is under properties here. Once you have that set up, you want to make sure, and a lot of people don't set this up just because they don't know. So you see this, the DNS tab here. Basically, you want to have your settings look something like this in most cases, because what this is going to allow your DHCP server to do is update your DNS entries itself.
As opposed to the workstations.
Exactly.
This is huge important,
Yeah.
guys. I mean,
Yeah.
if you take something from today's webcast, this is probably a big one. Let DHCP update DNS, guys. It's,
It's there,
right there.
It is
Right
there for you.
Yeah.
Take advantage of it. Saves you work, saves you
Absolutely.
heartbreak. As far as
headaches.
making DHCP redundant,
Okay.
so this is something that very few places that I've been at do.
Do you think it's just because of the lack of knowing how to do it, or just never thought of it until
Honestly,
just didn't happen?
DHCP doesn't break, these rules don't usually just stop working. But sometimes you've got to take the server down, right?
Okay. Good point.
Servers
Little
need to be
maintenance
updated, yeah.
occasionally.
Or it crashes.
Whoa. Equipment crashes?
No.
Never. So redundancy, basically, again, are we going to do that on the other DC?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So we have DCP, which is our primary domain controller, and then here we have DCS, which is our secondary domain controller. We've already gone through here ahead of time and added the DNS and DHCP roles to this machine, and we've also gone through and authorized it as an authorized DHCP server. You didn't used to have to do that, or you had to, but it didn't require explicit credentials in server 2008 R2, I believe, and newer.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember when we were playing with DHCP here and we were changing a server. You do need to be a member of enterprise admins, or else you're going to run into a bad time. Domain admins
Yes.
don't cut it in that scenario. You need to be an enterprise admin to be doing that.
Yep. So yeah.
Okay, before you do this, are there any, do we need to just throw up a big warning here, don't do this in the middle of the day, your leases may have some issues, we could take down the network, we could stop broadcasting a webcast.
As famous last words go, there shouldn't be any problems with this.
Shouldn't be. So what
With
you're
that
saying is
said-
do it after hours. Okay.
Obviously, you want to, if you can, do your maintenance during a maintenance window.
Minimize.
If you want to do this during prod hours, it's, I would say, pretty low risk, and you can sort of give yourself a buffer because the machines that have leases currently are going to go ahead and keep those leases until they expire.
Oh, I see Josh has got
everybody's got a test network, just some of us call it production too.
Okay. You got a question?
Dear Lex and Jake, is DNS able to store two entries for one computer? For example, LAN and Wi-Fi connections. Then based on this, try to connect to one address and then the second address on connection attempts, ping, deploys, etc. Thanks, Jorlando D.
Be my guest.
Absolutely that can happen. And because that happens so frequently, especially when you take your laptop off the
dock.
the dock and you go walking around, you get a new IP, you come in here to options, preferences, and network, repository deployments. Oh man, this is going to be great.
Performance?
Oh, there.
Yep.
Test multiple. Thank you. I was thinking inventory. Inventory, it's under networking, but you would test multiple addresses. So it's going to start testing until it gets a response it's looking for, and then it would deploy at that point.
Yep. And this is fine. This can occasionally cause issues if your DNS scavenging is not set up properly, because it'll go ahead and test multiple addresses, and
It may find a different name
Yeah.
for that IP.
Yeah.
So
that address maybe have been reassigned, and it just wasn't.
I'm
updated.
gonna
Yes.
pipe in here, everybody. This is Shane. So on the test multiple addresses, yes, it will test multiple addresses, but it is linear in that it won't test the second address that DNS stores if the first one returns. If the first address does not return, it will move to the second and third, however many entries it has, until one either returns the echo request, the ping, or until it's exhausted. So it won't test all of them. It will only test them in sequence if the previous did not return.
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you, Shane.
But yeah, so that is totally possible.
Do we want to do another question, or should we keep going? All right.
All right, cool. So what we're going to do now is we're talking about setting up DHCP to be redundant. As I said, we've got the DHCP role added to our secondary domain controller. It's been authorized in DNS, and you can tell that because it's got these little check marks.
Checkbox there.
Yep, everything's happy, but it doesn't have any scopes, so it's not actually handing out any addresses,
Not doing
right?
anything at this point.
So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to our primary one, which is serving up
This is the one that's
addresses
currently serving.
Yep,
And then we're gonna,
to this computer, actually. And it's pretty simple. We're just going to go to IPv4, and we're going to go configure failover.
wow.
I know.
That's tough.
I know. And we're doing this live for you from PDQ.
Okay, just a sec. At testing live, I've always had bad experiences, so I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So it's just a wizard. It's going to list the different scopes that are available to be configured for to be highly available to replicate back and forth. By default, it selects all of them. This is going to be fine in most cases. From here, you're going to go next. You're going to find your partner server. So this one is our primary domain controller. So we're going to add a server, and you can see
That's
that one's
primary.
authorized. Yep. And we're going to go DCP or DCS web. Boom.
Boop.
Hit next. And you're going to want to give it a friendly relationship name because otherwise it's going to be this
Wow.
long.
If you ever had to type that and you
Yeah.
type like me, it would never happen.
Yeah.
You would be
And if you
frustrated all day.
if you ever need to use
Undo
PowerShell
it.
to modify
Yeah.
or remove it, you have to type out that whole relationship name. So we're going to make it something nice and friendly like PDQ, DHCP.
Well, you do type like me. Awesome. It's not just me, guys.
You got the maximum client lead time, and this is basically server A gave me an address, right?
Okay.
I have a lease for 7 days. That server goes down, and my secondary server is like, is this a valid lease? As long as it's still valid in that original time frame, that's fine. And once that goes to expire, the secondary server will honor that lease for an additional hour to see if the first server...
came back up.
Yeah,
And then if not, it will assign at that point.
exactly.
So usually, guys, I wouldn't mess with that number. 1 hour seems to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Unless you have really, really, really long maintenance times. But I'd still leave it an hour.
And then the mode you can choose either load balance or hot standby. Hot standby is like actual failover, whereas load balancing is...
Why would you not
balancing.
use a machine that's there?
That's a good question.
I would load balance. That's me.
I
Anybody?
can't
Josh?
think of a good...
I disagree.
Okay.
I actually like hot standby.
Why?
Because DHCP requests, like, I can see a use case for load balancing if you have 100,000 machines trying to grab a lease, because you may need that. You may saturate that link.
Okay.
But it might come into a problem when you're like, well, which server just gave this machine a lease? If you're having to troubleshoot stuff, it might just be nice to know this machine is always giving leases to my network, and then use a load balance when you need to. But I think it's just personal opinion.
And also, if that is something that you needed to do, and you have it configured for load balancing, you can just disable the secondary DHCP server. Like you
Yeah,
can just-
absolutely. You can go either way and achieve the same goal.
Yeah.
Personal preference there.
And then you can set your percentage. This is just the percentage of the DHCP request that server is going to handle.
Situations you might do that if you had one that had like a lower bandwidth or
Yeah.
that kind of thing. You might
Yeah.
want to take a lower percentage of those to hand those out.
Exactly. And then you're going to have enable message authentication, and you're going to set a shared secret. This is going to be shared between your primary and secondary.
So people just can't spin up extras without knowing that.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah, you can't add just a rogue DHCP server onto the network because that would be bad.
Make sure that password's secure, like password 1.
Yeah.
Or
Hunter 2.
Hunter 2, or not a password. That's my favorite. So,
All right. So once you have all that set up, it's just going to give you the summary of the changes you're making. You can go ahead and hit finish, and it'll say, hey.
give you your
managed to do
summary
these
of
things.
successfulness,
Yay.
which is
That's all we
awesome.
do here is
I don't know if you
succeed.
noticed that was redundant. How many successfuls we saw.
I agree. And then if we go over
bad pun
to
day, huh?
if we go over to here, this will probably take very cool. I was going to say this might take a little bit to replicate, but it is
It was pretty quick.
already all good here. So we can see we have that same scope replicated onto the secondary server, and now they're going to alternate handing out addresses, basically. One of the important things to note here is that Windows, it will sync these scopes automatically, and it'll sync the scope options. So like we talked about earlier. However, if you have server options set, it does not replicate those. So if you have server level options set, you will need to reset those up on the second DHCP server.
Yes.
Yeah.
Question?
Dear Lex and Jake, in some cases, the DHCP is on the router or firewall. Do you know a way to integrate that with AD or authorize that DHCP server? And adding this as well, is it wise to do so?
I'm going to say depends on the vendor, but I don't think so.
Yeah,
I'm looking at Josh. You have any ideas on that one?
I mean,
do a
maybe
relay,
you can,
right?
I don't think you can get that into like a AD authorized server.
Yeah.
But what you can maybe do is set some scope options depending on that firewall to at least get you to the correct DNS servers on that lease. But I don't think it's going to be vendor specific.
I'm going to translate that. Difficult, don't do it.
Yeah.
yes, and yes.
Yeah.
I do believe if you do have an AD authorized DNS or DHCP server, you should, and you have one that is not like a separate, like a one on a firewall or a router. I believe you can authorize, like you can relay that into your AD authorized one.
You might be able to do some IP helpers there, but I don't
It's a
really
little
want to
messy.
say definitively yes or
Once
no.
again, let me translate. Difficult, hard to troubleshoot.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yes.
Yes.
Amen, Shane.
A lot of these devices will have it. Primarily used, I think, for home users that don't have this option. Honestly, I personally recommend choose your DHCP source and stick with that source. Don't try to have two.
Yeah.
All right. And then the last thing we wanted to talk about was DFS.
One of my favorites, guys.
Yeah, so DFS is a mechanism by which files can be replicated.
Absolutely.
And Active Directory actually uses it.
Yeah.
Yep. So when you have group policy settings and stuff, those are all stored in actual files, and those get replicated via DFS across your domain.
Yep.
And the way it replicates those is actually kind of neat. It figures out a mesh, almost, of your domain controllers.
Could do a little drawing
Yeah,
I did the other day.
of course.
So, guys, here's kind of a topology of this. A mesh would be, here's the 4 sites, and so all these sites are going to be talking to each other. So if I do something on site 1, it's getting replicated on all of them. If I do something on site 2, it's getting replicated on all of them, which is not necessarily a bad thing unless, let's say I'm storing some really big files. 'Cause
Yep.
Then I've got a bunch of file storage that happens to be redundant, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I want to control where I'm
that's-
redundant.
Exactly. For Active Directory, obviously you want that to be effectively a full mesh.
So I just want to know, did you actually pass art class?
God, no.
Okay. Well, all right, I can't do any better, so I was, anyway.
They only let me finger paint, so.
And you do it so well. Okay, so the other is, if we're not doing a full mesh, you would do something like a spoken hub
Yeah.
or a...
So you might have your main office here, right? And you have your offsite locations. And in some cases, you might want to replicate files from your main office out to those branches for quick and easy access.
A good example of that is you would replicate your repository so that when you're deploying, you don't have to send 100 versions of Chrome to Site 2. They just grab
Yep.
it all from the local copy. So
Yep.
and we'll actually show you guys how to do that right at the end here.
Absolutely. So that's one way to do it. And then you can do it sort of the other way. If you have branch offices and you want to back up their data to your main office, that way it's easier to
Backup?
make actual backups of.
Actual backups?
And something we should note, we're talking about redundancy and high availability here. Those are not the same things as having backups.
Yeah.
Please have backups and test them.
Josh, there was a comment.
he's
man.
making
I
a
could
face.
see it in the
Yeah.
face over there.
It's just the classic, redundancy, high availability. All of this does not equate to a proper backup solution.
And
It's
here's
a
why.
common fallacy.
Right? Here's why. I corrupt a file. It gets redundantly copied out to everybody. And now
I get
gotta-
crypto on server A,
I know.
and that gets replicated everywhere else.
And
Whee!
if I had a backup, I'd be able to grab that.
Exactly.
So, keep your backups, guys.
But DFS is really cool because aside from Active Directory stuff, you can use it for your actual like file shares.
Absolutely.
So there's two parts to this. The first of which is namespaces, and the second of which is replication groups. And we're going to talk a little bit about both. Namespaces, you've probably seen this kind of format before, where it's just like your domain. So // web.pdq.com is this domain. If we go here, we can actually see netlogin and SYSVOL. These are the Active Directory DFS shares. Don't mess with these.
Those, yes.
For the purposes of this, we've set up an additional one called deploy repo. And there's a folder within it that's been published called deploy. So if we go into here, we got a bunch of files.
So basically, you made the folder, you shared it, and then you selected it for replication. Best way to do that, guys, make sure you set the shares up on your different servers. It's the best way. It's not the only way, but the best way. Set them up and then tell them to replicate.
And of note, you don't always have to replicate. If you have multiple file shares, if you want to just consolidate all of them into one UNC path, it makes life really easy.
Okay.
But so we have all these files, but where are they, right? If we look on here, we can actually see the folder targets that are in this namespace are on these servers Chloe and Kylie. And
Are we keeping up time with
the Kardashians?
them? Yeah.
Yes,
I've
we
never
are.
seen the show.
And then we can see in our replication group, they get, this is the local path on each server, just C deploy. And we're on Chloe right now. If we go into the C drive, deploy, boom, all these files are here. If I delete one of these, say the Opera setup, this is going to take a minute and it's going to replicate over to Kylie. So if we open up Kylie, which we have here, this is the UNC path.
Okay.
Like this is our namespace, and you can see Opera's gone. And if we look in the C drive on here, it's gone.
Well, pull up deploy and let's pull up the repository and show the UNC path, because we're going to call that namespace. The namespace we called was...
So real quick, we have, I just want to show them.
go ahead.
So we have our package here, right? We have Google Ultron.
Did you make that?
I did not. That was Katie, I believe. But if we set our install path, we have a built-in variable called repository, and on here it corresponds to
Guinness.
this long path on Guinness. Yep. So if we go into preferences, we can see our repository settings. You can manually set where that repository is stored. By default, it's stored in C users public admin arsenal PDQ deployed repository.
Which is on the console machine.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's on your server.
Server, console, server.
Yes.
Okay.
If you're in central server mode.
Oh, very good. Okay. That's a good.
It is on your server. And if you're using central server mode, you'll note it does say you must use a UNC path for this. But the cool thing is, this can be set to any UNC path. So if we wanted to, we're not going to set it there. We're going to set it to...
In short, you put your namespace that you've created there as the repository,
just like
and
that.
then ideally whatever servers participate in DFS replication, when a machine needs to pull from that repository, it will pull from the server, the part of the replication that's nearest to itself. That's
Exactly.
that's where the namespace comes in.
Now, and the other part of that, and thank you, Shane, is you got to put it in pull mode.
Yep, this is super important because it's going to tell the runner, instead of copying from the server to your target machine, the target machine is going to pull those files down.
It's going to give that namespace and location. Go grab the local copy.
And that stuff is set in Active Directory sites and services. That determines where the machine's actually going to look, because it's going to try and grab it from the server closest to it.
Hey Lex,
Yeah.
really riddle us this, and you just sit there and laugh if Lex gets this wrong, Jake. Okay, Lex,
I
if,
feel like I'm getting set up.
if you put you're using DFS, you've got your namespace, you've changed your repository to point to this new fancy namespace that has all the replication, but you don't change your copy mode to pull and you keep it at push. What happens?
So what happens at that point is your deploy is going to be looking at that really cool namespace you set up. It's going to copy from the namespace to the console and then back out across the WAN to wherever it is you're deploying.
So
and
you
that
basically,
causes
basically you have obviated
stuff.
any benefit that you have added with DFS.
I think you actually made it worse.
You made yet an extra
Yes.
hop.
Yep. So you made it worse. So that is highly important, guys. You've got to get it in pull mode.
And then really quick, you've changed this at the top level, the copy mode. Can you change that at a lower level to supersede that setting? Like maybe I do want to do a push from a different package or something. Can you do that?
And yeah,
if
you
so,
can
how?
You would actually go into your package and you would go to properties, options, details. Help me out here. Options. Did you see that scanning? Copy mode right there.
Look at this.
I knew that. Thank
What a
you.
champ.
Thank you.
Hey guys,
Jake was having a heart attack watching you click every single window.
You didn't have to type
I
it,
think,
so
I think
it's
we
fine.
actually have some more. If you guys don't mind, I know we're going in DFS, but you got some more questions over here about DHCP and DNS that obviously we need to cover.
Let's hit it.
Dear Lex and dear Jake, is there a pro or con to having both DHCP and DNS on the same DC? I was told to never put both on the same DC, but I know others who were told to always put them on the same DC. With only 2 DCs, would you put both DHCP and DNS on the same DC for redundancy, or maybe even for redundancy? Thanks, Catherine M.
Catherine, I know what I would do,
I know what I would do.
and I know what. I'm pretty sure we're all on the same page here. I would always put them on the same. Unless.
Yeah, there are very specific Active Directory guidelines when you're in large environments for splitting roles.
Yeah.
But Microsoft actually puts out a list of supported roles on domain controllers. And in most environments, DNS, DHCP, DC, all fine on the same server.
They belong together like the Brady Bunch.
Yeah. And then one of the interesting things about DFS is just a little tangent, but the way it does that file replication, it's not file-based and it's not block level.
Oh, we had this debate yesterday.
Yeah.
What, Josh,
We did.
what was it
It's-
again?
I forget the name of the protocol. I'll find it and I'll put it in chat. But it actually monitors almost like hashes for
Oh, okay,
changes,
so like
and
you
will
change the
replace
letter
stuff
A, it's-
actually in the files instead of block or file level.
Yeah. So that's kind of neat. Did we have another question?
Dear Lex and Jake, for a small business, costs are important. Which server could be safely put on a VM? DHCP, DNS, secondary domain server? Kevin K.
Quite. As far as I'm aware, all of them. It's
You can
totally
do them
fine.
all. Personally, I like to have a physical DC with them on.
That was a requirement for a long time, or that was Microsoft best practice for a very long time. It's not anymore.
Are you saying my age is showing? I think it's a good practice to have physical and virtual in case you have an issue with your virtual
Yeah.
or any of the networking of the virtual. You've got the physical out there.
The place where it used to be a big issue was with Hyper-V clusters,
Okay.
because they are domain joined, and so basically, if you didn't have let's say all your VM hosts went down, and you only had virtual DCs, when you went to try and log into your VM hosts to
Had
start.
nowhere to go. Yeah.
Exactly. So that was sort of a requirement if you wanted to do Hyper-V clustering for a long time. Nowadays, they'll bootstrap a DC so that they can authenticate against it. It's pretty nifty.
What are your thoughts, Josh?
I've been bitten by this one time, and that's all it took.
Josh is very, very cautious.
I am. I had a vCenter server that used AD authentication, and all of my DCs were virtual. DCs goes down, can't log into vCenter, and then it was a scramble to find that root password. From that point forward, I had a physical DC. I didn't care if it was a desktop in the corner. Something was there to facilitate logons.
Raspberry Pi and Zen.
Raspberry. Yeah, I love it.
That was a cursed sentence. I'm
But
sorry.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it
that's the whole thing. Once you've been stung with the VM, you're like, okay, I just need one.
Yep. It only takes one time, and then you do it.
Yep. Yeah, you got another one?
And our final question of the day, how does DHCP redundancy affect the DHCP helper between subnets? Are there 2 or 1 tagged as a backup? Thanks, Jason A.
That's a good question.
I'm going to look at Josh.
I'm also.
I'm actually looking at Google right now because
You're
I
looking-
don't
okay.
know.
So small talk. Josh will find out in a second.
That sounds like a couple people need to take a drink.
I think
They
we
didn't have
got
that answer.
Yeah.
Stumped the chumps here. So
Well, Josh
I'm
is.
fresh out, man. I'm going to have to drink a Monster at this point. So.
I'm rehydrating.
You might be 2 monsters before I find the answer to that
Wow.
one.
Okay.
Ooh.
So it looks like we got a little homework. We'll have to get. I guess we're gonna have to get back to you, Jason, on that one. Good question, man.
Do we have any others?
I think they said that was the last
No, that's
one.
it.
Oh,
That was the last question?
So for everything else that we've got for DFS, refer to the videos that we have in the bonus content.
Yeah.
Yep, we have
Tons of- couple
DFS
of
in
videos,
10
yeah.
minutes, right?
DFS in 10 minutes. Just get your server set up, watch that. That'll help you get through it. If you squint really hard, I'm almost attractive. Or if you turn your monitor off, at least.
If you have a few Lex fingers of that.
There you go, Lex fingers of whatever, and you'll be sailing great. Okay, big takeaway here, guys. Again, we showed you a few things that will bite you. So make sure the changes on DNS to check those out, and make sure that don't do it in the middle of the day, guys. Do this after hours, okay?
Just
Yeah,
do a maintenance window.
Yeah, maintenance window.
better
after
safe
hours.
than fired.
Something like that.
And don't forget, next week, it's our first back to school. We're talking Office 365.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
Getting not just back to school, but that's a big one. Getting everybody coming back from vacation. Let's get your environment up to shape so that they think you've actually been working all summer.
What Shane said, guys. Yes, back to school 365. We'll catch you all later.
All right, have a good one, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining our webcast today. Congratulations, Catherine M. and Steve E., winners of PDQ swag. Just send us your info at webcast@pdq.com. If you have additional questions, go ahead, check out our bonus content, and feel free to reach out to our support team and our forums as well. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you back here next time.